All right, I'm going to do a video on metric measurement. This is a little trickier just because this is not something that they use every day. We talk about the other parts of the world. We talk about how there's 195 countries in the world and everybody uses metric except for 3, and we're one of the 3. So it's a little difficult because it's not something they're using on a day-to-day basis in our country. We use the same type of information. Sometimes we still use the going from a large unit to a small unit to multiply, or a small unit to a large unit to divide. So they can still use that if they would like to. We talk about the measurement tools and how they look compared to our customary, and the same type of vocabulary is going to be the same in this unit as it was in the customary unit. The only thing that we do is we talk about this being much simpler with liquid capacity, length, and weight. I always start with length because it's a little simpler, and how it is measured in meters, and then liquid capacity is liters, and then weight is always in grams. And I show them lots of examples in class. They get to touch it, compare it, those sort of things. So the only thing they have to remember is meter, liter, gram, and we say that over and over and over in class. They quickly realize that metric is nothing but place value, so they actually know parts of this already, which is wonderful. We talk about go back to learning when we were learning our decimal systems, and how if we have our ones place, our units place, it could be talking about 1 meter, it could be talking about 1 liter, or it could be talking about 1 gram. Those are our units that we're measuring in. It just depends on what the situation is. So those are our units, our base unit. I go from there in class drawing different place values, just like we started off with at the beginning of the year. This is literally the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. And then if we're going smaller after the ones units place, we have the tenths, the hundredths, and the thousandths. This is information they already know, which will be helpful, but we talk about the names in the metric measurement world, what they would be called. This is literally called the units, the base unit, whatever you're measuring in. So this is our unit. This next area is, well, actually I'm going to start down here. Our most popular one is going to be these few areas. Let me start with those. Those are the ones we're going to deal with the most. I teach all of these others, but we do kilo, the base unit, centi, and milli the most. That's probably the 95% of the problems they're going to see will be with those units. But they need to understand that kilo means 1,000. Hecto is 100, just like the hundreds place. Deca is 10. Deci is going to be 1/10. And they can write that as a fraction or a decimal, it doesn't matter. Centi is going to be 100th, and milli is 1,000th. And what I really spend a lot of time explaining is that means, let's only talk about maybe the meter stick. If I have a kilometer, what that means is I have 1,000 meter sticks lined up. So they understand it's a very large unit of measure. And if we go to something like the centimeter, it's like taking 1 meter stick and dividing it into 100 little pieces. And we also do the same thing with the millimeter. It's like a meter stick divided into 1,000 little bitty sections, so that they understand just how small we're talking. And it's good because they can see that on a real life meter stick that we have in class. But we talk about, even though we might be talking about metric units, it can be different. I don't know, it depends on what the situation is. You might not always just use 1 meter. If you're traveling from one city to another city, you're not going to want to measure that in 1 centimeter sections. You're going to want to use a kilometer because they're larger units to measure with. Versus if you are measuring the length of your hand or something much smaller, you're not going to want an entire meter stick because it would not even be 1 meter. You would use something more like a centimeter. So we talk about what you would use, what unit would you use depending on the object. That's where we have to spend a lot of our time. It's hard for kids to understand what unit would be best depending on the object. And then the only other thing that gets really tough is when they've got to convert metric. They have to really rely on the information they've learned in the past. Like if they had, well, let's see here, 12 meters, and I want to convert that into centimeters. So we're going from the meters to the centimeters, and there's a couple different things they can do. But one of the things I'll teach most in class is basically place value jumping. They're going to go from one spot to two others. Well, in place value, they know it's based on the number 10, so that's a 10 and then a 100. So it's something to do with 100. They just need to know, do they multiply or divide? Well, they're going from a large unit to a smaller unit. So they're going large to small, so they need to multiply by 100. So 12 times 100 is 1200 or 1200. Let's say they have 1 kilometer, and they want to turn that into centimeters. Now this one would be a much larger answer, but they're going from something large to something small. So large to small, they're going to multiply. They have to figure out what they're multiplying by. This is where it gets a little tricky. They have to really rely on their place value knowledge. They're going to go 10 times 10 times 100 times 1,000 times 10,000 times 100,000. And so they have to know 1 times 100,000 is 100,000. That way they can really understand how large a kilometer really is. They might also have to go the opposite direction, where they might have 250 centimeters, and I want to convert that into meters. So for this one, they are going to be going from a smaller unit, like the centimeter, to a larger unit. So small to large, this time they're going to be dividing, and then they've got to determine what are they dividing by. Well, they're starting at the centimeters, and they're going to the meters. So that's 10, 100. So they're dividing by 100. Well, they've learned that there is I call it a secret decimal at the end of this number. They need to use that. They don't need to actually do any division with this. They can just use basically their mathematical common sense with this, because if I have 2 zeros in my number 100, my number's moving 2 spots over also for the decimal to be right there, and I wind up with 2 and 5/10 or 2 and 50 hundredths meters. That's something that they learned way back at the beginning of school, so we're going to spend some time reviewing, but this is how I would teach it in class, and we'll be doing it over and over with lots of examples. So if you have any other questions, just let me know.